Actually, an ideal site for a foundry when you think about it. You've got all these rail lines feeding in here, plenty of transportation, and also very, who doesn't want a foundry in their backyard like these people obviously did right here? But the Studebaker foundry was always kind of mystery. They didn't take many pictures of it. It wasn't around for too long in use by Studebaker, as Studebaker acquired it in the early mid-1900s, and later on they built their brand new foundry, which opened in 1923-1924. But to give you an idea how we're situated here, the Studebaker, now it doesn't say Studebaker, it says Studebaker's foundry. There's no mistaking for whose it is, because frankly you could go knock on the front door and talk to Mr. Studebaker, maybe ask him to see his foundry, so reason it should say Studebaker's foundry. This is the modern day Western Avenue right here, and I think we figured this view here is probably right through the gap in these houses here, maybe right over here, but you're looking at the front end of the foundry. We see, yes, this is a little further down to the west there, you see the foundry looming, and the sign we saw the picture taken in front of, it's right there. I gotta say, until we saw this map here, I never fully, this was a pretty good size facility they had here. State of the art it was not, however. We do have some pictures from the interior, dirt floors, at times the floor also doubled as the pouring cauldron, if you will. And you can see why Studebaker was looking for maybe a more modern facility. And there's a circus ad down here on the fence here, and I dated this to about 1910, 1911 when that picture was taken. You see the Studebaker scheme. This is we can figure, this is the back side of the foundry here. See where the rail lines come in? Basically, you can just see the houses up here off to the left in the image. And so you can see, not exactly, as foundries go, this was not one of the more well-kept ones. Their groundskeeping budget apparently got slashed for that year when the picture was taken. So the foundry, now bear in mind, at this time, Studebaker's South Bend plant was not producing automobiles. Automobile production was taking place at Studebaker's Detroit plant, while the South Bend facility was producing horse-drawn vehicles that it had done for the last 60 years prior to there. And I initially wondered, well, was this just for the horse-drawn vehicles, or were they actually making automobile components here as well? Well, the stack of cylinder blocks out here tells me that yes, indeed, they were casting engines and other automobile parts, no doubt, which were shipped up to Detroit for the final assemblies. Really, automobile assembly at South Bend didn't start until 1920. You see again, the backyard, you can just see the houses. This would be Walnut Street over here. And although the foundry is no longer with us, it sits on the site, Pulaski Park. And if you've ever wondered why Pulaski Park has kind of the funny shape, triangular shape it does, that's the land, that is the site of the Studebaker foundry. And the houses we looked at, they're pretty much all still there. So just your average neighborhood foundry that went on to bigger and better purposes. Studebaker Brothers, established 1852. We'll try, again, sorry, no prizes for you guys today, but does anyone have any idea where this building stood? Hearing the silence in the room, we will give you some more hints. Studebaker, you'll hear us talk about Studebaker building numbers in any historic building talk, and we reference them. For example, Building 62 was the administration building, for example. Building 84, the body plant. If you look at the maps, though, it's pretty clear that they numbered the buildings pretty much chronologically. And, well, what was building number 1? Well, the first thing they built, it appears, on the new site on the southwest side of town, back at the very edge of the city, was actually the first, for lack of a better term, their administration building, their office building. You see the inset right here. This was what we focused in on before, and this was actually Studebaker building number 1. And gosh, who doesn't love a cupola like this here? But wonderfully decorated. This sat just south of the tracks, and we'll see some more pictures here to identify where this building stood. Again, these insurance maps are wonderful tools. We are looking north. Here's the compass row here. So north is this way. We're looking northwest. This is Lafayette Street. Main Street would be over here. The railroad tracks that you cross under if you're traveling north on Lafayette Street are right there. And there's a cupola of Studebaker building number 1. Now looking at this, you'll see this is also labeled offices. Apparently they ran out of space in building number 1 pretty quickly because these buildings were built just about a decade or two later. And judging by insurance map, this building wasn't really used that much for anything, but you see the adjacent building storage, and it's labeled storage, 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 and some later office buildings. So I think it was pretty, but they weren't exactly using it for very, very many operational purposes. So looking at this from the north here, and again, Kovaleski Stadium's parking lot would be right behind us. You're basically standing right in the middle of South Street. Lafayette Street is running over here. And they also had built building number 2, coincidentally, right behind it, also decorated with a wonderful cornice to announce to the world when Studebaker was established. I'm sorry the picture is a little beat up there, but railroad tracks that went right next to the plant were not raised above grade level until the late 1920s. So you can imagine all the traffic relating to people coming to and from the plant. And this is a very heavily traveled rail line. You were probably, many people spent a lot of time waiting at the railroad crossings. And we'll notice a cupola here too. Now, that's a telephone pole. Apparently at one time there was like a spire and flag on there, or maybe that was just the imagination of the guy drawing the maps. But as time went on and the building fell further into disuse, here we see the new Studebaker administration building being built, the building that still stands today, just south of the railroad tracks. You knew the building was not long for the Studebaker site. In fact, we have a picture that unfortunately was in a frame, and it was a panoramic picture. I couldn't take it out to put it on screen here. You're looking out to the west, and apparently the cupola had caused some problems because the building's still there, but the cupola is not. So I think in the late teens, they just removed the cupola and just put some roofing material over that. And that was really the end of Studebaker's first administration building, building number 1. But we mentioned the standpipe earlier. And why is the standpipe significant? Well, J.M. Studebaker was a very civic-minded man. He was very happy to serve many terms on various councils, boards, agencies, whatnot. And he was also elected numerous times to what was the equivalent of South Bend's Water Commission, determining how to improve and maintain South Bend's water structure. J.M. Studebaker was not fond of the standpipe system of providing water pressure. So basically you have a column of water in there that's providing the pressure to the rest of the city infrastructure. And it's not surprising. In 1872, J.M. saw much of the Studebaker plant burn, and apparently he felt that the water pressure for whatever was needed was not sufficient to prevent the fires from spreading. So after South Bend went ahead and installed the standpipe system, he, much over his objections, he wagered one cow that, with the city council's leading advocate for the standpipes, that firemen could not reach the cupola atop Studebaker's administration building with water propelled from their hoses. Well, to insult a man's water system is just something he's not going to stand for, so he accepted this bet. And on Christmas Day, 1873, J.M. Studebaker and then United States Vice President Schuyler Colfax ascended to the very top of the cupola to try and settle the bet. Now I gotta say, J.M., if he's gonna do it, he just doubled down. If you're gonna get soaked, might as well do it on Christmas Day when you can really enjoy it for all it's worth. And I think the firemen also knew that, we've got this one, because sure enough, as soon as they went out on top, they received a thorough drenching courtesy of the local fire brigade. The cow was escorted through downtown South Bend, much to the amusement and delight of onlookers, and was actually subsequently auctioned off for charity. I understand he was quite tasty. Now moving on to we're going to get into the residential side of things. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Tippecanoe Place. In fact, I think I know a couple people who dined at Tippecanoe within the last 60 minutes or so here. And when Tippecanoe Place opened in 1889, it received tons of coverage in the press. It was the most palatial mansion the state has ever seen. And the South Bend Tribune, South Bend News Times, all but wrote a special edition on just every aspect of Tippecanoe Place. However, J.M. Studebaker had built a mansion about 8 years earlier, and he called his mansion Sunnyside, but we don't hear much about Sunnyside. J.M. Studebaker is a fine home in the same breath as we do Tippecanoe. And even the coverage back in the day, the photographs, this was one of the more difficult parts of this program to put together, because J.M. Studebaker's mansion, though no less palatial than Tippecanoe Place, simply did not receive the attention that the mansion did of his older brother. And I think a couple of reasons for that. J.M.'s mansion, it was way out of town. It was not in the city limits. In fact, to give you an idea of where we're looking here, this is Eddy Street right here. Here's Jefferson Boulevard, so we're looking northwest. You see Sunnyside poking up on a wonderful bluff. And just down the hill was a mansion that belonged to J.M. Studebaker's son-in-law, Fred Fish. Thankfully, we found one insurance map, and this is from 1945, that actually shows us, because for so many years, the South Bend city limits ended at Eddy Street. So, and this was all J.M. Studebaker's farmland. If you go back through these old maps, you realize that J.M. Studebaker was like the South Bend's east side land baron, because they owned, at one point, almost everything from Colfax all the way down to the rail tracks. The land that was Potawatomi, current modern-day Potawatomi Park and Adams High School was also owned by the Studebakers at one point. But to give you an idea, to orient yourself, there's Sunnyside. There's Sunnyside's carriage house. And there's the Fish Mansions. Hopefully this will give you an idea. And you can just see this is an overlay map here, but the church that's right on Eddy Street there, that's right on the footprint of the Fish Mansion. Sunnyside, there's another house that is built almost on exactly the same footprint. And the carriage house is still with us. Now looking at this from the other direction, you see Sunnyside right there. Again, Sunnyside is no longer with us, but the carriage house still is. The carriage house was converted into an apartment and remains with us to this day. Conestoga Lane, which is how people get up there. That's actually basically where Conestoga Lane is now, just going north of Jefferson. So we were trying to find, I'm thinking, well, J.M. Studebaker, one of the richest men in South Bend, when he opens a brand new home, you'd think this would rate some coverage in the South Bend Tribune or one of the other newspapers. Well, as near as we could tell, about the same time that J.M. was ready to move into Sunnyside, there was a national tragedy that occurred, and that was the assassination of James Garfield. And James Garfield was shot by the assassin's bullet. However, he hung on. He hung on for about another 5 to 6 weeks, and the newspapers were reporting every minute, every prognosis for Mr. Garfield's health and the prospects of his survival, which, as we know, did not prove to be successful. And I think what happened is, honestly, coverage of rich local building a new house just got bumped for all the coverage of the nation's president, only the second president to endure assassination attempt at that time. But there was the occasion of a wedding. J.M. Studebaker III and Lillian Studebaker were to be married late September 1881, and it took place at the residence. And they had this to say about Mr. Studebaker's new house. The grounds near the house were brilliantly lighted by calcium lights and innumerable lanterns that dotted the carriage side roads, which wind all about Sunnyside. Now, calcium lights, does anyone know what the more common name for a calcium light is? I see Jim Cerny kind of turning in his chair. No, actually, the limelight. When you say something in the limelight, that's actually another name for a calcium light. Mr. Studebaker's home, to which he has recently moved, is the most elegant in the details of its construction and the costliness of its furnishings of any residence in Indiana. The walls are of red pressed brick with white stone trimmings. The roof is slate, and outside and in the leading characteristics of the Elizabethan style of architecture are adhered to. Large rooms, wide long halls, grand staircases, heavy cornices, gorgeous frescoes, elaborate mantels, richly wrought ceilings, and heavy carvings everywhere. Stepping from the vehicles at the porte cochere, the guests passed into the Great Hall, which runs the entire length of the building east and west. Along the left wall are openings into 2 parlors and the library. On the north are the openings into the dining rooms, reception room, and the grand stairway. It is wide enough for a stairway of a hotel and is richly carved, as are all wood furnishings about the home. Above stairs are numerous chambers for guests, billiard and smoking rooms. The frescoes are very elaborate. Those in the parlors are rich with gilding, which looks at first as if it were intended to simulate brickwork, but serves to bring out all the other frescoes in delightful contrast. The floors are covered with the most luxurious velvet and Turkish carpets. The walls are rich with French mirrors, sconces, and choicest paintings, and the niches and statues and works of art gathered in during extensive travels in Europe. But wait, there's more. The library is finished in ebony throughout, with an ebony deeply paneled ceiling everywhere about the home is a wealth of inlaid work. All the appointments are luxurious in the extreme, luxury, convenience, and comfort, being consulted in everything regardless. I want to know more about the billiard and smoking rooms, as that is not something that ever comes up on my searches on realtor.com. As we see, the South Bend Tribune's account did not lie. There was certainly not an unadorned service within the room. The grand staircase, as you see there. I will say this is Mr. Studebaker's decorating tastes are slightly different than mine, but he certainly did not want for decorations throughout the room. And here we see Mr. J.M. Studebaker on the site of his birthday. He has a lovely birthday cake. I don't know if the candles represent the actual number of years, but given his past history with fires in his factory, I hope they did not let those indoors. Unfortunately, you see the picnic here. Well, this is, by the way, pictures like this are wonderful for people in my line of work because everyone's numbered and identified down here. The entire Studebaker family had gathered for the picnic here. And the Studebakers, even though they were, certainly they could just keep to themselves on what amounted to their vast Studebaker estate, they were more than happy to open their home and host numerous affairs. And this particular event took place right around 1890. There was a brilliant gathering at Sunnyside, the palatial and charming home of Mr. J.M. Studebaker on the suburban heights just east of the city. So just think of it, you're crossing Eddy Street, you go up the hill, and now you're in the suburban heights of South Bend. It was composed largely of young people of South Bend and young married couples, and was the social event of the week. Every part of the house was brilliantly illuminated and filled with fragrance of flowers. All guests descended the grand stairway each and was handed a program of the evening's musical and literary entertainment. And about 9:30, the exercises commenced. They mean the performances. They weren't doing like yoga or romance. The library in the west part of the house was reserved for those who were to take part, and the auditors, and again, not financial people, auditors, people listening on an audio setting, were comfortably seated in the parlors in front, and the wide hallway and dining room to the left, giving an excellent opportunity to see and hear. Light refreshments of sandwiches, coffee, ice cream, and cake were served at the close of the program, and the rest of the time was given over to social pleasures without restraint or formality. The floors of the library, the dining room, and hallway between them were canvas, and it was the inspired music of the orchestra, and all who desired could trip the light fantastic to their heart's content. The gentlemen sought pleasure in billiard and smoking rooms, and some a social game of cards. Sounds like a great time. I mean, I'm sorry the mansion's not there anymore. But unfortunately, like so many large homes of this time, they're hard to maintain. They're very large, and especially when it came down to Mrs. J.M. Studebaker, Lillian Studebaker, wife of James Studebaker III. She was really the sole person occupying that huge, huge house. And in 1950, Mrs. Studebaker announced, she explained that she and the members of her family arrived at the decision to raise the home only after months of serious reflection. She said the mansion impractical and unwieldy, and is now only a vestige of the way of life that has passed. Some other tidbits about Tippecanoe. All right, Sunnyside. In 1922,